Okay, so first episode, I guess, of this series that we're working through, we looked at Python and Django. We did a real crash course, getting a couple things up on that. Now, I mentioned, and was a part of the demo environment I used, was built in AWS and Amazon's web services using some of their developer tools. And these are very complex tools in some extent. They do some really not simple things related to DevOps and stuff like that. And I think it makes sense to step aside for a second, as we're going to be using these as part of part of the series as we go forward. I want to step back and take a look at some that are out there and have, again, this is going to be really sort of a crash course, but to sort of set the stage. And we will come back and probably talk about more of these as we get further into the process. And there may be a couple of these that we actually do, depending on how far we go with this in this series, that we may actually do entire presentations on a single tool. And I'm thinking about things particularly like pipelines and code deployments and stuff like that, where it is it's a tool that you can use sort of out of the box without too much work. But if you really want to do any kind of customization, then it starts, it can get complicated fast. So it's one of those things that there's a lot of customizations you can do, which is sort of it's almost a hallmark of, I've found, I think, of AWS, is that they tend to have a dashboardish type approach where you can jump in, you can click a couple buttons, and you're off and running. But underneath that dashboard is really, in a lot of cases, a very deep amount of customization that's available. And this is, again, thinking about it from the graphical side of the tools. Almost all of them have command line interface stuff that you can also do. And a lot of time, the CLI actually has more functionality than you can even get out of their graphical dashboard. And so there is a huge amount of customization you can do. And if you've worked in anywhere that has an enterprise scale AWS deployment, you probably have run across this, where you'll find huge amounts of scripts that are JSON or XML that are configuration and setup and doing all of those things behind the scenes that make for the steps, the automation of the steps to build an enterprise system. So we're going to look at today in this presentation and do a quick summary, and then I'm going to look at CodeStar, CodeCommit, CodeBuild, CodeDeploy, CodePipeline, and CodeArtifact. If you go out to the AWS site, they have groupings of services, and they do have one that is developer tools or development. And there's I think they're up to about a dozen different services related to that. We're not going to get into all of them. These are the ones that are really more or less applicable to what we're going to be doing in this Python series. So starting with the AWS tools. The AWS Development Tools in general, why they are development tools, is they provide full-featured modern development tools and environment. If you want to do software development, if you want to do container deployments, if you want to use pipelines, if you want to use version control, if you want to use triggers related to the version control, if you want to have staged environments, development, test, production, things like that, all of that stuff, there are mechanisms for that within the AWS development tools. They are development tools, but they also are really a lot of DevOps tools. So it's a little bit focused on the development side, but more focused on the deployment side and tracking that and managing that. When you get into the development tools, there are free tier options for most of these things, as we'll look at, but they also utilize other AWS services, particularly the storage service, S3, so that there are some things where if you either do heavy usage or have a lot of files or big projects or something like that, then you will, end up finding that you'll trip past some of the free tier stuff and you will end up getting charged. So while this is you can do this free or very low cost, it is something that if you want to go full blown into developing a big environment, a big product or something like that, or complex environments, then you want to keep an eye out, because you will, go past the free tier and end up generating some costs. It's probably not going to be, depending on what you do, if you're not, if your deployments are not to huge amounts of users and you're using small server resources, you're talking, even if you go a little nuts, probably $5 or $10 a month. But it could get expensive quick if you start, clicking on some high end services and server resources. All of this stuff by default is secure. That's one of the nice things about AWS, is if you want to spin up an environment that's secure quickly, AWS does that by default. Their settings are pretty much best practices built in. And then there's also command line interfaces for all of the stuff that we're going to see, so that you could automate this stuff completely, actually. In a lot of companies, that's what it is. You don't actually, although we're going to be dealing in the on the dashboards and the consoles, there's a lot of places that don't. They may do that a little bit more for reporting and management, but the actual work is all command line scripts, because it's more powerful and easier to automate. And of course, it's easy to version control those scripts and things like that. So let's start with the mothership of it, I guess, which is CodeStar. CodeStar is a quick way to launch an entire development environment. When you use it, it's going to include building out a version control, setting up a repository, and you can do that either within the Amazon world, or you can actually link out to GitHub. It includes pipelines, triggers, possibly server resources, all of that, whatever you need basically to build an environment very quickly. And this is a full-blown CodeStar. You can, in a matter of, I don't know, depending on how long it takes you to enter some data, probably within 5 or 10 minutes, you can have a full-blown environment that includes your development server, includes pipelines for development, tests, and production, the scripts so that you can, when you commit, you can push it and it'll go push to each of those 3 environments. Backups related to those releases and packaged releases and the artifacts related to those releases, all of that stuff. CodeStar is if you want a modern environment in minutes that can get you going, CodeStar will get you there. It does support dozens of environments and languages. Let's see if I flip over to that real quick. I think, let's see, let me jump into CodeStar as a quick example just to show that. I hope I'm already signed in. I am. So if I wanted to create a new environment, and I think we've looked at this before, but there are tons. I mean, you can do Go, Node, Python, Java, Spring, pure HTML, whether it's a static website or not. Lots of node-related stuff. We see Python and Django. A lot of these have combinations that are like Ruby on Rails and Python-Django, where you can either do it through virtual servers or you can do it through Elastic Beanstalk. So it's entirely being created dynamically based on usage and things like that. So there's a bunch of services and environments that you can build based on CodeStar, and you're, like I said, you're off and running quickly doing so. So that was I just wanted to do a quick, as a working session, really just showing you this for this point. Actually, well, let's see. I think we will go ahead and let's just pick, like, let's say a Java Spring with Elastic Beanstalk. What you end up doing is you put a project name. Like I said, you can either use CodeCommit, which we'll talk about, or GitHub. When it does so, I'm just going to call it this. When it does so, like in this case, it's going to tell you which resources it's going to use. A few of these, Elastic Beanstalk and CloudWatch, are not development tools on their own. CloudWatch is to allow you to do monitoring and see how your servers are doing, things like that. Elastic Beanstalk actually is essentially a containerized way for you to build out, and it doesn't have to be containerized. I guess it could be virtual machines for you to deploy out and have something that dynamically can size as needed. We use CodeCommit for source control, and CodeBuild actually does the build and deploy. Actually, can do build and test, and then does the deploy stuff for Elastic Beanstalk. CodeBuild is where you would build out your jar files, war files, zip files, whatever it needs to be, your artifacts. Then deploy actually takes those things and pushes them out to servers. I'm not going to actually go ahead and create one this time because it takes time and is not terribly interesting. So moving forward, so that's CodeStar. That's the big picture thing. So let's look at some of these pieces that we're going to work on, or that we will also use. CodeCommit. Now, CodeCommit is full-featured Git version control. If you're used to Git with anything else, then CodeCommit is that. It has command line interfaces that you can use. You can hook it up to your favorite Git client. It does take a little bit of reading between the lines and actually reading the manual when they talk about CodeCommit, because at least for myself, when I first used it, I assumed that CodeCommit was something that I would use my Amazon login and password to access that repository. That's not how it works. They actually have you generate a separate set of credentials for your Git credentials. They are not your Amazon credentials, which in itself is secure, and because then you're not having to use that Amazon login as often. It also would allow you as like an administrator, you could have Amazon access and have users that actually do not have Amazon access, but you just give them the credentials so they can have access to the repository. Once you've got that, then it's just like anything else. That's your login, your password. It does allow for key related, so you could do it through private key, public key, things like that. But the easiest way is just username and password. That seems to work with all of the Git clients that are out there, like SourceTree and stuff like that. There is a free tier to CodeCommit. This is a sort of newer thing. Initially, when they did CodeCommit, it was not free. In any case, you always paid for the storage. But I think as GitHub became more popular, and some of the other Git servers that are out there allowed you a free tier, then they opened that up, and it's not bad. You can have unlimited repositories, up to 50 gigabytes a month of storage, which is a lot of code, up to 10,000 Git requests a month, and you get that for up to 5 users. And now if you want to go beyond 5 users, then it's $1 a month per user past 5. So for 6 users, it's an extra $1 a month. At that point, you get 10 gigabytes of storage per user and 2,000 requests per user. So if you pay $1 a month, you can support 6 users. You'd end up having 60 gigabytes of storage per user and 12,000 requests per user, which, depending on how you use your Git, that's a lot of requests. As I mentioned before, it's highly secure from the start and has separate credentials, so you can set that up and treat it really as almost as a non-Amazon thing if you wanted to. You could get up, once you got it set up, you wouldn't even know nor care that it lived out in the Amazon world. So CodeBuild. This is the taking your source, and it's sort of, I guess, intuitive. Their names tend to be that way. CodeCommit, you're committing changes. CodeBuild, you're building. And this is a screenshot from a pipeline. And basically what you can see is you run one, it's going to have a version. So you have a build number, and then if I did that, and they'll have statuses, and you can see where they were created and things like that. So this is your build process plus an audit trail related to it. So it is a fully managed continuous integration tool. It allows you to do your builds, launch them, track them. You can roll back and things like that, which if you're using Elastic Beanstalk, or I guess actually anything, if you wanted to roll back within your build history, you can easily go back to a prior build, because each build is going to have as one of its deliverables, or what comes out of that, is going to be a software package. So you can always roll back to that old software package, that prior package, if you wanted to do so for whatever reason. It makes it real easy for you to shift around to different versions. It makes it easy for you to deploy, because you can just pick from the list and go grab the files behind it. It does also have support for AWS Lambda and triggers, which is key if you want to integrate it with CodeCommit, because then you can go in and build triggers related to, typically what you would end up doing is have certain branches would a commit to that would trigger a build and things like that. Or you can also you can manually trigger builds as needed. CodeDeploy is really the next step. So you take what you did, what you built, and then you can deploy it out to places. Again, just seeing a little bit of the dashboard here from an example. You can see where some failed, where it's going to send it to, where it's going to send that deployment, what the application is. There's ways to group stuff. So that this happens a lot if you've got for example, source code plus a database. So you would maybe group those resources, those development resources. You can go and figure out where the deployment packages are. As you can see here, they're pretty much always going to be stored in S3. And again, it gives you a nice little audit trail of what's been deployed. This is one of those that sometimes Amazon just lays it out better than, faster and easier and better than most of us. So the straight quote from the CodeDeploy homepage, essentially within the services. It is a fully managed deployment service that automates software deployments to a variety of compute services such as Amazon EC2, AWS Fargate, AWS Lambda, and your on-premises servers. So that last bit I think is pretty key, is that you can use these services with pieces that are not Amazon. You can actually deploy to even either other servers in the cloud somewhere on say Microsoft Azure or Google, or you can even go to on-premise servers. Obviously you've got to set up the security and all of the things needed to be able to access those servers from the Amazon environment, but it can be done. And it works really great then if you want to do a hybrid environment where, for example, maybe you've got on-premise testing servers, but your production stuff's in the cloud. Or I guess you could go vice versa, but typically, maybe as you get closer to developers, it's more likely to be on-premise. And as you get closer to production, it's more likely to be in the cloud. And so CodeDeploy allows you to have actually pipelines that deliver to both of those, out to the cloud or to on-premise servers. And again, CodeDeploy, it does allow you through Lambda to automate deployments and have triggers that are based on whatever you really want to do, which would include things like, triggering based on a commit, and then triggering based on whether tests were passed or failed, and the kinds of things that are pretty much a staple of code DevOps these days, the kinds of things that you see in enterprise deployment environments. So CodePipeline is really that next step, is actually pushing once you've deployed. And actually you can see here, which is a nice thing, is you look at from CodeStar how they sort of lay out the development tools. You start with your source, which is where you commit changes. Artifacts are actually, we'll talk about in a second, but those come from your build. You do your build. Once your build goes through, you set it up so you can deploy it. And CodePipeline actually pushes those deployments out to potentially multiple servers. So you can see here, there's only one particular one, but you can see where there was a build that succeeded. So the source was committed, And once the commit was done, then a build was triggered and that was built out. And so it's deploying, that pipeline is then pushing that thing further to, if you were to scroll down here, you'd see where it goes actually out to a production server eventually. So CodePipeline is your continuous delivery, basically. And continuous doesn't necessarily have to be contiguous. Continuous, it can be triggered, but this is your delivery mechanism, your rules around delivery. It does integrate, because it's a development tool, as you would expect, integrates with other services like CodeCommit and artifacts and build and Elastic Beanstalk and things like that. It's set up to allow you to very quickly build and deploy as needed and even to multiple targets. And this includes complex systems, for example, where you would have something maybe that delivers some sort of a package out for mobile app, and another package out to a web server, and another package that goes out and sets up or updates a database. And you can do that even across multiple servers and multiple environments. So CodePipeline allows you to very essentially manage, and I'd say rather easily manage, deploying out to lots of different environments and targets. And like everything else, it does allow a Lambda to sort of be that glue so that you can set up triggers, you can do notifications, where you would, again, for example, based on a commit, you're going to go through all your deploys. We mentioned maybe you don't deploy if there's a failed test. Well, maybe that's part of that failed test is we have a trigger that sends a notification out to the development team that says, hey, this failed. Or when it's successful, everybody gets an email that says that this was successful and here's where you can find the latest deployment. And there's other things you can do. I mean, you can get pretty complicated. There are some places that integrate things like, for example, like a Jira, that you could actually integrate in with your pipeline so that you can pull all of the tickets that were addressed in that build or that release, and you can actually could automate release notes to some extent. Things like that you can get pretty slick with these things. It just depends, again, a little bit on how much time you want to invest in doing so. So those are our 5 core, well, actually 4 of them. There's one more that I'm going to touch on. So the key services are CodeStar, commit, build, deploy, and then we're going to talk about artifacts or CodeArtifact. Artifact is one that's sort of, and it came along a little later. We had CodeCommit, build, deploy, and then they added pipeline, and then they added CodeArtifact. CodeArtifact is actually fairly new, and it is focused on what comes out of the build. We typically will end up building something that is a package of some sort. Like I said, a WAR file or a tar or jar or all the other different types of packages that are out there, maybe even a zip file. And we want to keep track of those things. There's value in keeping track of, essentially a deployment that was done at a certain time. Now, you can do that through looking through the audit history of things like build and deploy and pipeline, but Artifacts allows you to just pull just those files out and store those somewhere so that you've got backups of them. It's secure, and you can even publish from that and share it out and things like that. So it gives you a nice way to handle just essentially the binaries or the deliverables of a build or a deployment. It's really useful when you start thinking about things like, for example, like Maven or Gradle or Yarn or a lot of these package managers that have certain libraries that you want to access, certain repositories of information that you want to deal with. Because you may have a build that is pulling certain libraries out, but there's maybe there's specific versions that you want to work with, which almost always you do, because you know that if somebody creates a new version, it could break the versions you had. So you're not only able to, with Artifact, it basically says, we're not only worried about our source code, we're providing an easy way for us to also store the other things that we rely on, whether they're framework versions and library versions, jar files, DLLs, all those things that are usually a complete headache to deal with from a development point of view. And this allows you to just push it all into one place and say, okay, for this build, this is what we use. This is how we access it. And if you've dealt with development environments that are beyond really one or two developers, actually probably even beyond one developer, when you're using something like Maven or Gradle or Yarn or any pip or any of those, then there is that, we want to use this version of something, but then that person has to go build their local repository, and you got to make sure that it got to the right place. And if it's not accessible or got moved or something happened to it, then you may not be able to get a hold of it. This instead says, okay, well, we're going to manage, we'll hold on to those ourselves, which makes sense. I mean, think about the most basics of a website where you're using, for example, like Bootstrap or something like that. You can link out to bootstrap.com and to their libraries and their current CSS or JS files. Or, the better thing is you copy those things locally and you refer to those. And you don't want to modify those, but you do want to have a local copy of that library, so you have something you can access all the time. It's not relying on somebody else's server or storage or access to that. Now, CodeArtifact it's basically a storage repository, so it's based on size of files or amount of files, I guess, and size is, I guess, the bigger thing here. So the free tier, you get 2 gigabytes a month free, and then it's 5 cents per gigabyte per month after that. So if you want 3 gigabytes a month, it's going to cost you 5 cents a month. 4 gigabytes, it's going to cost you 10 cents a month. And this is for your, this could become, hit that gigabyte pretty quick, depending on how many libraries that you want to use. But honestly, in a lot of these cases, if you're using, multiple gigabytes of libraries, you probably have a pretty fat application from start, and you may want to look at that a little closer. It's also based on request as well as size. You get the first 100,000 free, and then it costs 5 cents per 10,000 additional requests per month. And like I said, this works with a broad range of tools, Maven, Gradle, Yarn, all of those kinds of those things that you probably have run across, depending on what environment you're working with. You've run across these things. Everybody's sort of got their own repository and build management tool these days, and it seems like all of them can work with CodeArtifact. I had set to do a working session, but other than, well, I guess I will do a quick, because I think I can show a couple of these. So CodeStar, let me blow this guy up a little bit. CodeStar gives you a dashboard of your entire development environment. So this is one that I put together and I've just been playing around with. I can see, here's code commit, so I can see off of whatever branch, which I only have master. I can see the history of commits. I can see application activity. This is CloudWatch. This is showing me hits on my application itself. I could actually connect into Jira if I want to. We can see over here, we can see that I've got a CodePipeline set up where I've got source, and then it was built, and then I had a fail the last time I tried to do a deploy, and I could go look at the deploy history, and it failed because I had too many individual instances failed deployment, and I can dig into that if I wanted to. I can go in and see the logs and see what happened. So after install, I can see that there was some script launch there. Most likely what happened in this case is I actually did not have my server that it was trying to connect to existing anymore, because I shut one down. And so you can see that. But you can go in and see at any point. I can go to I don't really need to see that because that doesn't show me much. But here out on S3, I can see where my build file ended up getting put. In this case, it was a single one because this was for a, let's see, I think it's for a, good question. What was this? Oh, for a PHP application. Let me go back to CodeStar. If you have if you use Cloud9, you can actually jump right into that. It'll have links to that. I can close that right now. You can very easily do that. You can actually do your own issue tracking if you want to get it. If you don't want to use Jira, you can set up a team. You can actually bring multiple developers into your project. And they, again, because the way it's set up, they don't have to be on your AWS account. These are just people that you would have as part of your team. We did talk earlier about they've got their little videos and things like that to help you through things. You have a wiki that you can connect to, and you can actually put some information on. If you have Cloud9, you can see your Cloud9 environment. This is actually, the endpoints would be, this is where, if this was running, that's where it would be running. Actually here, there wasn't too much doing it. The last time it built, it just was a little bit of a hello world kind of thing. And you can see where it failed to build along the way. You can do a release manually through here. There's a lot of stuff you can do through your pipeline pretty quickly from the dashboard point of view. If you want to do obvious or common tasks like a manual deploy, things like that, or deploying a specific version, you can actually go in and you can make changes. So if you wanted to actually get complex, you can actually go in and do things like I could add a testing stage, things like that to my pipeline. All of these work. The nice thing about the way the developer tools are set up is they tend to give you a nice little the side menu, so you can walk your way through each of the really the most common things that you work with. So I can actually go in. If I go to codes, I can see my repositories. Sort of typical stuff you would expect from a Git repository is that you can come in, you can do pull requests, you can grab a URL of HTTP, HTTPS. You can actually look into your repository. You can take a look at files, stuff like that. And then you can, all the stuff you would expect from a Git environment. And then Git, build, deploy, and pipeline are just not that graphically interesting, so I'm not going to mess with those. And I think that's pretty much the gist of it that I wanted to go from a quick hands-on. Is just sort of show it to you. If you have questions about any of these, as with a lot of the Amazon stuff, the quickest way to get comfortable with it and just get an idea of it is go to like this one's blank for some reason, but go to their videos. Take a look at the getting started stuff. You probably are going to want to look at pricing on most of these just to make sure that you don't get into a situation where you're paying money for stuff that you don't want. The nice thing though about CodeStar is if you go in and build those things out, you could actually go in. Let's see if I go here. I could, if I wanted, I can delete it. And part of it, the nice thing about this is that one of the options is delete it and all of its related resources. So if you wanted to build up a little test environment and then play around with it for a couple of days or a week and then get rid of all of it, and that would be everything, potentially including like your source code repository, things of that nature, you could do so. And of course you have access to all those, so you could always build that environment out, play around, keep your source code, pull your source code local, store it off somewhere, and then blow away the repository. Or you could, even point it to GitHub or something like that if you didn't want to be on Amazon and wanted to play around with the CodeStar features, but be able to at least, hold on to your source code. So we've just really, in some senses, we've just scratched the surface, but luckily the way these things are built, we are able to scratch the surface and not necessarily have to go too deep into it for some basic, for a nice basic development environment that would allow us to get started and get working. They have, what the takeaways for this should be, Amazon's got a large number of development tools, like a dozen or more. And actually, just to look at that, and you can see here where they've got groups. They've got some interesting groups that show up these days, like robotics or blockchain or satellite. There's some neat service out there. Developer tools, they've got 8 key ones. And then if you go out to, I think it's just AWS. And you go off of their homepage, I think is the one where they actually have, there we go, developer tools. You see that they've got quite a few more. Some of these are, and I guess some of these are not as directly that you're going to see from the dashboard. For example, their tools and SDKs, but they do have, or even they've got a production ready distribution of Open Java Development Kit. So they've got some stuff out there, or the Cloud Development Kit. Some of these things that are not really dashboardable, but they are libraries and frameworks and things like that that will help you if you wanted to do, if you want to get out there and do some code, some high-end development, and really get comfortable, I guess, with what is becoming sort of a professional development environment. And it's wide ranging, everything from coding, an IDE out on Cloud9 to device farm. If you want to do testing across a lot of different devices, they have the ability to do that and help you out with it. These are worth exploring beyond what we've talked about. Just again, depending on what your needs and your desires and focus are. Most of these are integrated, particularly the ones obviously that I've shown, where you see that nice little dashboard off to the left as you're looking at it. A lot of these have some level of free tier, so you can get out there and get comfortable with it without spending a single penny. And as we've seen, there's a pretty nice GUI that goes with all of these, so you don't have to get into the command line and learning those options. They are very powerful. And there are a lot of examples on how to use a command line, how to use it to be more efficient and productive. But if you just want to dip a toe in, I say, the GUI and the dashboard allows you a good way to do that. So that brings us to the Q&A portion. Is anybody questions, comments about what we've covered?
Yeah. Question is. AWS, is it playing in the industry? Is it becoming big, or has it been around compared to, is it Azure? Like, is it kind of the same, like a Microsoft tool that, is it Azure? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct.
That's funny because I've had conversations the last month or two with a couple of people that some people call it Azure, some people Azure. I don't know if there is an official way to pronounce it, but to get back to the core question, it's interesting because AWS has been around longer by far than Azure. AWS has been around since like 2002, I think 2003, something like that. It's pieces of it, but now when you look at that screen of Explorer products, there are so many products out there that they have built, and a lot of these have only come up in the last couple of years. But both Amazon and Microsoft and Google does this too. I think I'm not as up to speed on Google as I am the Microsoft and the Amazon world, but those, I think Amazon and Microsoft are creating more services on a regular basis. So if you're on their emails or news lists or anything like that, you literally will see advances every week. I think literally you see at least a new product every month, and usually multiple products per month. They're just growing at that kind of a pace. And Amazon has been around for a long time. It is stable. Some of the tools I've shown you here have not been around all of that time. Actually, none of the development tools have been around since 2003, 2004, something like that. But they've been around for a couple of years. They are some of the newer things, but they are in use. There are a lot of people using them. I think that it may be just geographically where I'm at. I think that actually the Microsoft stuff is more common, but I'm not. Again, that may be my geographic location and things like that. I do find a lot of Microsoft shops that do use Amazon as their cloud stuff, but as Azure has really progressed quickly in the last few years, it has stuff that is more or less comparable to what I'm showing in the Amazon world. You could do a development environment in Azure that would be roughly the same. There's some pieces they don't have, but most of the key pieces they do. I haven't played around with. I know that they have some sort of pipeline tool and things like that. I have not worked with those enough to know how reliable or not they are. But there's so many other tools out there that you can use for this if you want to, that I don't know if that would be necessarily a blocking issue either. So it's just one of those that it's becoming common. And actually what's becoming more common in the last year or two is I've found a lot of places that actually run both, that they'll have some of their stuff out in Microsoft and some of their stuff out in Amazon, or some of their stuff out in Google, or all three, which is not bad. Then you're not tied down to a single vendor.
Okay.
Other
so
questions?
Pretty much they're in competition, isn't it?
What was that?
Pretty much they are competing with each other.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Oh. There are very big competitions. There's a lawsuit that was filed because last year, seems like it was last year, maybe earlier this year, Microsoft won a huge contract with the government to supply all of their cloud stuff, and Amazon sued them because unfair business practices or something. I can't remember what they did, but there's something that they ended up, Amazon turned around and sued them, and you got to figure it's worth it, because it was I can't remember how much it was. We're talking like billions of dollars that it was worth, maybe trillions. I don't know. It was worth a ton of money, and you see a lot of businesses like that where there is definitely heavy competition. To be the cloud provider for companies, particularly large ones.
Gotcha.
So
Rob.
Oh, sorry, Tim, you go.
Go ahead, Rob.
No, you got it.
I was just going to ask a quick question around how companies are using these cloud services to set up redundancies and failovers, almost a DNR, or was it a disaster recovery plan, something like that. Anyhow, something to use these cloud architectures along with maybe even on-premises stuff to be resilient to failures.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. The DR portion of it, I think that was the sort of like the gateway drug to the cloud for a lot of these companies, because they had, especially some of the companies I've come across that are more, we'll say, established, they've been around a while, that they're that kind of company that has a little, a local data center and servers that they bought, and they invested, hardware money into their data center. And they got to a point where they looked at stuff and said, oh, we really, we need to have something in, for disaster recovery and contingency plans and continuous operations and things like that. So that we've got to have something we can fail over to. And they would look at the cost of having a second data center versus using the cloud as their failover. In a lot of cases, they said, well, hey, this would be a good way for us to try out the cloud stuff. We can sort of set it up and somewhat use it, but not necessarily do it as heavily, so that we can see what the cost structures are and things like that. And in a lot of cases, they actually needed to, I think a lot of these companies, because with hardware, you just buy a box. So they would buy something big enough that it would support them for a while. Well, with cloud, it makes more sense. If you're doing it right, you need to have a more precise idea of what your needs are as far as budgets and things like that are concerned. And so I think they use this as a starting point to get a better idea of what their resource needs truly were. And so many of them are finding that it's cheap enough, or cheaper, particularly when you consider like maintenance and having people to take care of your servers, and like lightning strikes and all the things that can happen that can screw up your servers, and or somebody spills coffee or whatever it happens to be. That there's a lot of places that initially, when I talked to them, they weren't very high on cloud, and they're like, well, we can use it, we'll make use of it. But as they got further into it, they found that it actually makes a lot of sense. So I think that's where they're going, is that while there's definitely a lot of hybrid environments out there still, I think Microsoft's done it, but Amazon definitely has spent a lot of time in the last year or two really providing specific tools for having those hybrid environments, whether you want it mostly in the cloud or mostly on premise, whether you want a few edge devices, including the things like the what do they call it? The Microsoft, Amazon snowmobile, I think is what it's called. What is it called? Because that's going to drive me nuts. Well, now it's the Snow family, where they will go as far as they will send a truck full of storage devices to your location. If you've got terabytes of data that you need to get to, out on the cloud into the Amazon world, it would take you forever to do, that transfer. Well, they'll actually go as far as send a truck out there or mail you hardware that you can then directly connect into your server. So you've got that super fast connection. You can pull all your stuff over, you ship it back to them, and they push it out to the cloud. So they're definitely spending a lot of time on the hybrid world. And Microsoft does that too. I know a lot of customers that are Microsoft shops that use SQL Server or SharePoint or things like that. And Microsoft is working with them to have that hybrid kind of an environment, and figuring out how to. And both of them are working on ways to basically take your security and extend that security into the cloud, and things like VPNs and stuff like that to give that warm and fuzzy thing that you need with security. It's one thing if you own your data center and you've got every piece of it, but as soon as you let it go out into the cloud, then you have a lot of other concerns and a lot of other worries. And that's I think probably been the biggest thing that has slowed progress. But as security is getting better, and honestly, as people are being forced to not have direct access to data centers, the COVID stuff's huge. Getting people, you've got all these remote workers, so now they're not sitting in an office. You have to have a VPN anyways, and all this other stuff that I think is going to see the cloud it's going to keep on increasing.
I see. That's good.
Hey, Ryan, I think you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I do. So, one thing that I've noticed is, obviously there's like Amazon, like we kind of touched on it a second ago, kind of actually, there's, Amazon, like AWS stuff, there's Microsoft Azure or Azure, or however you say it. And there's also like Google Cloud services and stuff like that. So, I mean, I guess going forward, like, I guess enterprise standard wise, like, because there's so many different platforms to house like these cloud services and stuff like that. Like, how do you decide which one to use, really?
That is probably a presentation in itself.
Yeah.
I want to say Timothy actually asked about this last time, which I'll do a little flashback to that answer. Is that the one thing I have not found that I think would be highly valuable is a comparison of the three major ones of Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, and where their strengths and weaknesses are. I think I think each of them have certain strengths and certain weaknesses. I am biased towards Amazon, I guess, because I've worked with Amazon EC2 since I don't know, 2008, maybe 2009, maybe 2007. I don't know. I goes back quite a way when I fired up my first EC2 server, and they had S3 and a couple others. So I've worked around with Amazon for a long time. My all of my servers, my business servers, the developer stuff, that all runs either on Amazon or Linode, which I think actually is sitting on top of one of those services anyways. And that's actually that's a pricing thing in itself, is figuring out what your usage patterns are to make sure that you can make the most of the pricing, because it does get pretty complex and detailed. But I think the other thing is that these things change so quick that it's hard to keep that current. But in doing so, actually, I guess back to that point, as I say, I'm partial to AWS, but the Azure, whatever you want to call it, Microsoft, I'm very impressed with their interface. Although I'm comfortable with Amazon and their dashboards, the Microsoft stuff is solid and pretty slick. And if you want to do a full-blown SQL Server instance in the cloud, you can get out there and do that fairly quickly and have pretty much everything you need to get access to. Their pipelines, their development tools, they've been pretty good with developers for a long time. When you think of what Microsoft's Visual Studio does for those tools, but they've continued to do pretty well with that. They bought GitHub and some things like that. So there's bits and pieces that I would have my complaints against, but it's a solid environment, and they're very aggressive in their pricing. So the big difference there would be a Unix machine that's virtual in Amazon versus one that's out on the Microsoft cloud. I think actually the last time I looked, it was cheaper generally to do Amazon, but it seemed like it was a little cheaper if you did Windows. It was going to be cheaper to do it in the Microsoft world. So I think as developers, sort of shortcutting the answer to that one, I think as developers, it really has gotten a point. It makes sense for us to know all three, unless you are in a company that you're going to be in for a long time that has, bet the farm on one of them. And even then, I think it's almost gotten to the point where, as we talk about whatever your primary development language or languages are, it's helpful to know some other ones to, at least to sort of tinker around in them. I think it's the same thing for the cloud environments. I think whichever, it's useful to have some exposure to all of them. They all have some level of free tier stuff that you can do. And all of them, you can get lost. You can fall down a rabbit hole, and you could spend days or weeks really exploring some of the features that are out there. But it's, just having at least a surface level knowledge of each of them. I think it's gotten to the point where it's valuable to have that.
Nice, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, that was a good set of questions and comments there. So sort of wrapping it up, as always, thank you for your time and hanging out and listening to us here. You can catch us if you want to, if you have any questions, if you have anything else that you want to discuss. If you're part of the Slack channel, you can definitely throw stuff out there in general at any time, or maybe just as easy, shoot an email out to info@developernoir.com. We got a contact us form out on the developernoir.com site. And follow us on Twitter @developernoir and see what's going on there. Actually, there's a lot of stuff that I'll post, because usually I try to keep it about 30% are direct Developer posts. The rest are links to articles on some of the things that we discuss here. D-Zone is one that has a lot of stuff, and I find myself, basically retweeting or whatever, or posting stuff pointing to their articles on a regular basis, because they've got some pretty in-depth stuff. And we follow the AWS, their primary news feed, so there's a lot of stuff there that will end up trickling out through Developer Noir Twitter. And we actually, since we're boomers or whatever, actually not boomers, but just in case there's boomers out there, we utilize Facebook and have a developer page out there that we post stuff to as well. All of that, just trying to make every developer better. And that'll wrap this one up. So have yourself a great day.